Hi friends, welcome back to 5 Minute Modern. My name is Cindy, and today we're taking a look at the work of one of the most iconic pop artists of all time, Roy Lichtenstein. Lichtenstein began his career in the 1950s, which, as we've already discussed on this channel, was the age of abstract expressionism. Non-representational compositions with large and noticeable brushstrokes. After some early experiments with figurative painting, Lichtenstein made a series of abstract paintings heavily influenced by the abstract expressionist painters who were then dominating the New York art scene. But as the 1950s turned the 1960s, the art world began to change. A new generation of artists like Jasper Johns, Claes Oldenburg, and George Siegel began making representational works that explored common images and experiences. In 1958, the pioneering performance artist Alan Caprow published his famous essay, The Legacy of Jackson Pollock, in which he argued that the future of art ought to be focused on the materials and spaces of our everyday lives. With this argument, Caprow essentially laid out the idea behind the pop art movement. Rather than drawing a strict line between fine art and the so-called low art seen in advertising and popular culture, pop artists sought to blend the two, using the language and style of popular culture to produce fine artworks. Influenced by these ideas, in 1961, Lichtenstein painted Look, Mickey. The painting featured Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and mimicked the style of comic books. This painting would be a major turning point in Lichtenstein's career, marking the beginning of the style for which he is now famous. Lichtenstein's friend Jasper Johns was actually the one who suggested to Lichtenstein that if he was going to paint the subject matter of comic books, he ought to try to mimic the look of the machine printing process used to make comics. The idea, as Johns saw it, was not just to paint Mickey Mouse, but to paint the image of Mickey Mouse, as it would have been seen. Consequently, Lichtenstein began using Ben-Day dots to color his paintings. Ben-Day dots were a printing method developed by Benjamin Day in the 1930s. Day found that he could achieve the color tone he wanted simply by printing a few dots in primary colors. Rather than mixing a sort of peach color to make a Caucasian skin tone, for example, Day found that he could just print scattered red dots over a white background, and from a distance, it would look about right, therefore saving a great deal on printing costs. After Day developed this method, it was carried out entirely by machine. In manually painting the dots himself, Lichtenstein was making his work look as though it was made by machine, not by hand. This stood in stark contrast to the abstract expressionists, whose bold brushstrokes very clearly indicate the human touch of their maker. When Lichtenstein debuted this work, it was widely criticized by those who insisted that he wasn't actually painting, he was just copying. Lichtenstein responded to this criticism with a cheeky 1963 self-portrait, featuring himself as a comic book villain with a sinister image duplicator. For Lichtenstein, making his work look as though it had been copied straight from a comic was precisely the point. Like all pop artists, Lichtenstein was holding up a critical mirror to mainstream culture. And I find Lichtenstein's most interesting provocations to come in his paintings of women. Drawing inspiration from over-the-top melodramas like the DC Comics anthology Girls' Romances, Lichtenstein portrayed women as exaggeratedly emotional and obsessed with their romantic attachments. Girls with long blonde hair and red lipstick, all dating dudes named Brad. Of course, this wasn't actually how Lichtenstein saw women. Rather, he was aiming for a camp sensibility, exaggerating the flat stereotypes of women in popular culture to mock the stereotypes, not to mock actual women. Lichtenstein's work happened to fall at a moment of dramatic change for women, too. The publication of Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique in 1963 gave rise to the feminist movement, which challenged the idea pushed on middle-class Caucasian women for decades that their only goal in life ought to be to find a husband. In channeling these images through his ironic sensibility, Lichtenstein gives us a chance to laugh at the absurd ways of thinking that have held women back. Lichtenstein was no less capable of pointing the mirror at himself, as he did in his 1980s Reflections series. For this series, Lichtenstein revisited many of his most iconic paintings, this time painting them as if they were seen through a mirror, whose glare partly obscured the image itself. Artist David Salle noted that it's as if Lichtenstein is saying that pop art itself is long gone. Pop art had been absorbed into the culture, becoming integrated in the very consumer society it had originally critiqued, leaving us with only traces of its original bite. Thanks so much for joining me on this one. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something new. Please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below what you think of Lichtenstein's work. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.